Sometimes I feel a bit sorry for David Tennant. Just when he thought he'd gotten away from it, they pull him straight back in. And then they split him in half. So as you've probably noticed from the title and thumbnail of this video, I have decided to kind of split this video in half. Even so, I kind of wanted to give 14 his own video like I have done for every other Doctor, including 8 to an extent, but there just wasn't enough material for me to cover just his era, so I thought I'd take a bit of inspiration from the bi-generation and split it into 2, with the first half being the 14th Doctor, and for you, 5 fans of the movies out there, I'm joking, I promise, I'm also going to be covering the Peter Cushing movies in the second half. Now, my opinions, like in every video, may be different from yours, and that is completely fine. Please tell me about them in the comments, and if you do enjoy this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. But with that little bit out of the way, let's get straight into the anniversary specials. After 5 years of Jodie Whittaker in the role and only 3 seasons in her belt, it was time for a bit of a change with Doctor Who. And by change, I mean just going back to what worked previously, and that is literally just what the anniversary specials is. A trilogy of mostly interconnected specials with some pretty large differences between them, with a returning Doctor and a returning companion. Kind of the first time in the show's history that both of these things have returned full-time, and once again though, full-time is kind of a stretch. Honestly, I was so excited for these. I, as you can probably tell, wasn't the biggest fan of Jodie's era until the end, but I still felt like there was something missing, the spark of Doctor Who. And this season, well, season in quotes, is done by Russell T Davies, who did series 1 to 4. Now, Russell's become a bit controversial recently by the fanbase because that's what the Doctor Who fanbase does. Anyone who's showrunner will be controversial. Doesn't matter if they do amazing stories, doesn't matter if they do bad stories. They will just be controversial. So I won't be getting into all that stuff about Russell and any of the so-called quote-unquote woke politics, especially in this little trilogy, but I may mention them slightly. It's just, I don't think it's my place to go properly into them. I'm not a kind of political analyst or anything like that. I just watch TV and have fun. And these anniversary specials, in my opinion, I had a lot of fun with them, but let's get straight into them and I'll explain why. The Star Beast is actually a story adapted from a 4th Doctor comic story, and I really like it. I know some people have issues with this story, and it is currently the most disliked of the trilogy. I think people need to give it some slack. This isn't the high-concept sci-fi that people were expecting, and I'll agree with that. But this is a return to the comic cheesiness that plagued seasons 1 to 4 in the best possible way. As you saw from some of my videos there, stuff like Boomtown and, of course, The Unicorn and the Wasp are some of my favourites, and this episode brings that straight to the forefront. There's so much good comedy, so many amazing acting, and honestly, this brought me back to my childhood in ways that I'd basically written off by this point. There's a couple of minor issues to the end, especially when we come into some of the awkward statements made by Donna and Donna's daughter, but even so, I had a ton of fun with it. 8 out of 10. It's great. Wild Blue Yonder is one of the high-concept sci-fi stories that people were expecting from this new era. And honestly, from a plot perspective and from a horror and sci-fi perspective, it is incredible at times. There's a lot of horror moments in this. It very much feels like The Thing or to younger viewers Among Us. And yeah, it's really good at what it does. I also kind of like the opening sequence. It doesn't really amount to anything apart from a running gag and next season's kind of main plot point, but it's fun nevertheless, and Mavity is funny. But when it comes to my main issue with this episode, it is completely down to the CGI. It's just not very good. This is the first little Disney era, which I forgot to mention at the start, but hey-ho. And yeah, the CG just looks a bit cheap. It looks cheaper than what Doctor Who usually had, and it really draws me out of any scenes in the hallway. And because of that, I genuinely can't give it higher than a 7 out of 10, which is annoying. Last up for this trilogy is The Giggle, and honestly, I loved this finale. I thought it was so good to end off the trilogy. I do wish there was more stories in between, but As this goes, I'm pretty damn happy. Now, Wilf, who appeared at the end of the previous episode, does not sadly appear in this properly, as Bernard Cribbins was getting too ill by that point to actually appear. But still, I like the fact that he's sort of in it. I also love all the stuff with Unit. The stuff with the Toymaker dancing in Unit is one of the fucking greatest things that Doctor Who's done in a long time. I also just really love the vibes, jumping back in time, all the stuff with the Toymaker versus the Doctor, with the little Toymaker's realm and all that. Absolutely awesome. I love Shooty's appearance in this. I think it's great, but that's also my main issue. We only got about 10 minutes with the new Doctor, and I kind of feel like it was rushed. I'm not the biggest fan of the fact that he was kind of forced in at the last second, because I want to see him properly. But still, 9 out of 10. Great ending to this little trilogy. And that is the 60th anniversary specials. Short but sweet little trilogy that, honestly, I really enjoyed. I get why some people have some issues with it, especially the Star Beast for being way too comedic, but it's still fun. I love this little trilogy. I think it is so good. And after the issues that I had with seasons 11 and 12, and even though I like series 13 a lot more, I still have a lot of gripes with it, and this honestly fixed so many of my issues. I love all the characters, the new ones that are introduced, and a lot of the old ones that they bring back, like Mel, for instance, who appears in The Giggle. Kate, as always, is one of my favourite supporting characters in Doctor Who, so that's always a good for me. But like the new cast members, such as Shirley, love Shirley, really hope she comes back for Series 15, and Colonel Ibrahim, great as well. I think he's fun, even though he doesn't really do much yet, but still, I really like this little trilogy, and as you can see by my ratings, it's pretty clear. I honestly just wish there was like a 4th episode of this, just like a pure historical episode, not like a pure, but some of it takes place in the past for the Doctor and Donna, so we could have gotten that futuristic space one, then the historical, and then 2 set on Earth. But even so, I had a ton of fun. As you can see from my rankings, yeah, it was pretty clear what number 1 was going to be, and it was also pretty clear what the bottom was going to be, but it's not bad still. This little trilogy was great. I really enjoyed it, and I am so happy with Shooty being the Doctor. I think he's such a good actor from like Sex Education and obviously the Barbie movie, and you'll see next time that I'm quite a fan. So let's get to that. But before we do, I'm going to take a little detour this week and let's have a look at the official Doctor Who movies. Following on from their massive success during the 1960s stories, the Daleks were essentially sold by Terry Nation to a film studio so they could produce some movies, and that's how we got this. Just to clarify, Nation didn't sell the full property, just the movie rights temporarily, and it was originally meant to be for a trilogy, but you'll see later why a 3rd one didn't come out. Now, this thing is so weird for so many reasons. So, the character is not called the Doctor. They are called Doctor Who. And it's in Dr. Who. Not even Doctor, spelt fully. They also have a granddaughter called Susan, who's now about 10. He also has a granddaughter called Barbara, but yeah, not that Barbara, but also kind of that Barbara. And Barbara has a partner called Ian, but not that Ian, but also kind of that Ian. It's weird, but then in the second one, due to actor availability, they had to swap out Ian and Barbara for 2 different characters, and there is a minor connection to the anniversary specials, but not a proper one. Even so, let's have a little look at this. It's so weird, but it's kind of fun. Also, just a little bit of a heads up, because these are proper, released in cinemas movies, I'll normally give reviews about a minute. For these ones, I'm going to give them 2 minutes. I just think there's a lot more to talk about when it comes to the weirdness behind it, and yeah, I just think it's fairer to full cinematic releases. So, let's head in to Doctor Who and the Daleks. Doctor Who and the Daleks is a remake of the original Dalek story written by Terry Nation. This time it's been kind of edited / rewritten to mostly to fit a more cinematic level of storytelling with a much faster pace, as well as cut out a lot of the fluff. tons of other stuff. There's one episode of a classic serial which is 22 minutes of them trying to cross over a small gap in a cave. They basically removed about 19 minutes of that episode and just made it a 3-minute scene, and in all honesty, it does work better. So there's a ton of differences between this version and the one that was released for TV. Biggest one for me, honestly, is the colour. I know that now we have the Daleks in colour with the colorisation for the 60th anniversary, but this one is such a big step for what was available at the time. So Doctor Who was obviously shot in black and white and in 4:3, but because it was a feature-length film that was released in cinemas and stuff, full beautiful colour, and of course widescreen. And I really do think it benefits the story in some places. But then we get to a lot of the negatives as well. As mentioned earlier, the character's now called Doctor Who. They're also human. The TARDIS prop itself looks terrible. It's like it's just been thrown together on the inside, as in the production team were given about 5 minutes before shooting to make it look like a sci-fi warehouse thing, and they literally just threw wires everywhere to be like, yeah, that'll do it. It's much better than the next one, just a heads up. All the characters are just kind of meh, apart from Susan. She's great throughout it. Even Peter Cushing's version of Doctor Who just isn't overly interesting. The files are completely useless, and because the Daleks are in full, bright, pretty colours, they kind of lose the threateningness, a bit like they did in Series 5 of the modern era. I don't really like this version. If I'm going to watch any version, I'll watch the original, so 5 out of 10. They gave it a good go. Daleks Invasion Earth 2150 AD is the sequel to Doctor Who and the Daleks, this time adapting the Daleks Invasion of Earth story from the second season of Classic Who. And to be honest, this is actually quite a good adaptation. They cut a lot of the fluff out like they did in the first movie, but this time it doesn't feel like they sabotaged things in order to get to that wrong time. They also had to swap out some of the actors, so Ian and Barbara are not in it. Instead, it's Doctor Who's niece called Louise and a random policeman called Tom, who is played by the amazing Bernard Cribbins. See, I told you there'd be a link to the anniversary specials. And yeah, they're much better characters. Ian was annoying in the last film and Barbara did absolutely nothing. And in this film, Tom is funny and entertaining and kind of an action hero, and Louise is also there. Louise literally does nothing in this film. They basically cut all of Barbara's good moments from the original story, which is a massive detraction. I also think Peter Cushing's version of Doctor Who is much better in this one. He still can't do much, mostly due to Peter Cushing's health at the time, because, wow, they really did try to emulate the first Doctor's era. And Susan does so much in this movie. Like, my god, they gave this, little 10-year-old actress so much to do, and she nails every single scene. She is the best part of both these films. I also think that a lot of the special effects in this one look really good for the time. I understand nowadays they look a bit crap, but to the time, really damn good. My main issue honestly comes down to how fast-paced this version is. Doctor Who and the Daleks worked kind of in some instances because the Daleks had a lot of fluff, but Daleks Invasion of Earth doesn't have much fluff. So there's a ton of important scenes that are missing in this one, and a lot of context is cut out for certain moments. But even so, I'd say this is good. It's a 7 out of 10, and if you're not the biggest fan of serials, I'd recommend this one over the original, but only if you're not a fan of Classic Who in general. And that is it for the Peter Cushing films. So, as mentioned earlier, the reason why we didn't get a third one based on The Chase is literally because the second one bombed. We don't have box office records for either film. All we know is that the first one was counted as a financial success, which is why the second one was quickly rushed out. And the second one was not a financial success and cost like $100,000 more, so they just cut the losses and didn't do a third one. I do think it's kind of a shame because I like things in a trilogy, just like the previously mentioned anniversary specials, and this one just doesn't. It kind of sucks. You feel like there's more for these characters to do. And since Doctor Who and the Daleks was kind of meh and then massively improved upon with the next one, as you can see from my ratings, I think a third one based on The Chase would have worked better. And since both these movies take a lot more comedy approach, adapting something like The Chase, which is already a lot more comedy focused from the first two, would have really benefited, and I think they would have genuinely made the best one of the trilogy. Even so, with my rankings, because, basically just swap those two over, I'm still not the biggest fan of these. I mostly just don't find the point in them, and this is 100% just because I've watched every single episode, literally. I know the stories inside and out, I know which ones I prefer, I know which ones I don't, but I would also state at the same time, for someone who isn't the biggest fan of the way that serials are written, the way Classic Who is written with its much slower pace, this is for you. I don't particularly like them, but this is 100% for you. If you're a fan of sci-fi stuff but can't watch the pacing of classics, these are literally made for you. That was the point of these, to be a lot more comedic, a lot more entertaining, and a lot more suitable for general audiences. Even so, I kind of liked them. They're not bad. I do own them both on the Blu-ray, and I went to go watch them both when they got the 4K remasters in cinemas when I lived in York. So, swings and roundabouts, goods and bads. But with all that out of the way, thank you so much for watching this video if you got to the end. I really enjoyed talking about both 14 and 15, and next month we're going to properly talk about 15 instead of mentioning for about 2 seconds. And yes, I did purposely skip over talking about enjoying the movies because I had to watch 3 hours of stories I'd already watched and I think are better in their other versions. So until next time, I'll see you when I'm covering Shooty's first and currently only season so far, and have a good rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend. Toodles!